Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. My name is Nathan, and I've been wrestling with a question. How long can someone put up with disrespect in a relationship before they finally call it quits? How many times do you let it go, shove your feelings down, or convince yourself it's not worth the fight just to keep things calm? For me, the breaking point hit at her birthday party, a night that pushed me beyond what I could stomach. I'm going to tell it straight, exactly how I saw it unfold. So hear me out to the end before you weigh in. This wasn't some impulsive choice sparked by a single moment. It was years of tiny fractures, things said and left unsaid, stuff I overlooked, stuff I tried to patch up, piling up until that night when something snapped for good. Every heartbreak story begins with a glow that feels untouchable, and mine with my wife, Julia, was no different. The first time I saw her, it was like time froze. She was standing in a bustling bookstore in Denver, exuding this steady confidence that hooked me instantly. It wasn't just her beauty, though she had that in spades. It was her sharp wit, her clever banter, the way she could talk about anything and make it feel natural. We clicked right away, like we were built to fit together. Back then, I'd have bet my life she was the one. Everything felt so perfect, so fated, that I didn't second-guess it. Our relationship took off fast, and I was sold, convinced we were a match made in the stars. If anyone had tried to tell me otherwise, I'd have brushed them off without blinking. Naturally, I proposed. When she said yes, it felt like the world was handing me everything I'd ever dreamed of. We got married and settled into a cozy place just outside Boulder, ready to carve out our future. But once the thrill of the wedding wore off and real life kicked in, I started noticing cracks, small habits that hadn't popped up when we were dating. I told myself it was normal, just part of getting used to sharing a life. Everyone's got flaws, don't they? I loved her, so I let it slide, offering her the same patience I'd hoped for myself. What I didn't catch then was that those quirks were whispers of something bigger, something I'd been too swept up to see. As the months stretched on, those little flaws got sharper, tougher to ignore, like a hum turning into a buzz I couldn't tune out. I've always seen myself as a family man, picturing a couple of kids racing around the house, maybe a cat napping in the sun. It's how I was raised, and I never thought of life without that piece. When I married Julia, I assumed we were on the same wavelength. That was my first real mistake. We never dug into it, not properly. I thought marriage meant building a family, no discussion needed. She never hinted she felt differently while we were dating, never mentioned not wanting kids, so I figured it was a done deal. But after we settled in, one night over coffee, she hit me with it. "I'm not thinking about kids right now," she said like it was no big deal. "I've got other priorities." It threw me. I didn't argue. Told myself she'd warm up to the idea eventually. That time would nudge her toward it. I didn't want to pressure her, so I played it cool. But inside, I knew I was dodging a red flag I wasn't ready to face. Then there was this other shift, subtle at first, but growing clearer the longer we were together. Julia had a habit of digging in when she wanted something. No room for debate, no chance for give and take. It didn't matter what I thought. When we were dating, I'd jump through hoops to make her happy, and I loved every second of it. Her grin was my reward. But as time wore on, I saw her need to steer the ship wasn't just a trait. It colored everything. The more she got her way, the less my own voice seemed to count. And there was something heavier lurking beneath. She started carrying herself like she was a cut above me. She'd toss out these little digs, sly remarks with an edge, and slip them into our talks. Worse, when she did budge, which wasn't often, she'd act like she was tossing me a bone, like she was lowering herself to meet me. That word, lowering, dug into me every time. It didn't feel like love. It felt like I was something she put up with, not someone she chose. I'm not lazy. I grind at a design firm, clocking long days to keep our life afloat. I covered most of the bills, kept the house in order, pitched in wherever I could. Julia had her job too, but my income held us up. Still, it never seemed to score me any points with her. She'd glide through our routine, acting like I should thank her for sticking around, never saying it flat out, but letting it leak through her tone, her shrugs, the way she'd twist every choice back to her. I started feeling like a sidekick in my own story, hustling to keep pace while she owned the stage. Those early days when we felt like partners, they were slipping away, replaced by a quiet, sinking feeling that I was fading and maybe losing who I was along the way. Living with Julia started to feel like walking a tightrope. I was balancing my own needs against her unspoken rules, and the more I tried to keep things steady, the more I felt myself slipping. Her little comments, those sharp, offhand jabs, weren't just occasional anymore. They'd woven themselves into our daily life, and I couldn't shake the sting. She'd say things like, "Well, I guess I'll make do with this," when I'd suggest something, her tone dripping with this quiet superiority. It wasn't loud fights or big blowouts that wore me down. It was the slow drip of feeling less than, like I was auditioning for a role I'd never land. I'd always thought love meant lifting each other up, but with Julia, it started feeling like I was the one holding her pedestal steady while she looked down. I tried to push back against it, at least in my head. I'd tell myself I was overreacting, that every couple has their quirks. I'd remind myself of the good times, those early days in Denver when we'd laugh over late-night coffee or lose hours exploring the city together. But those memories were getting fuzzier, drowned out by the reality of our life in Boulder. Julia's job as a freelance consultant kept her busy, and I respected that. She was good at what she did. But I was pulling my weight too, juggling deadlines at the firm and keeping our home running. It somehow, in her eyes, it never seemed to measure up. She'd come home, toss her bag on the counter, and sigh like she was carrying the world, while I'd been up since dawn making sure the bills were paid and the fridge was stocked. I started wondering if she even saw me, or if I was just part of the scenery. The kid thing lingered in the background like a ghost I couldn't shake. After that first conversation, I didn't bring it up again for a while, hoping she'd shift on her own. Months turned into a year, and one evening, I tested the waters. "Hey," I said, keeping it light, "ever think about what it'd be like to have a little one running around?" She barely looked up from her laptop. "Not really," she replied, her voice flat. "I'm good with how things are." It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said it, like the idea was beneath her. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and let it drop. I told myself I could wait, that maybe she just needed more time. But the truth was creeping in. We weren't on the same page, and we never had been. I'd built this whole future in my mind, kids, a noisy house, a family, and she'd never signed up for it. That disconnect started gnawing at me, a quiet ache I couldn't ignore. Her need for control didn't help. It wasn't just about big decisions, like where we'd spend holidays or how we'd budget. It was the small stuff, too. If I picked a restaurant, she'd find a reason it wouldn't work. If I suggested a movie, she'd counter with something better. At first, I'd go along to keep the peace. I hated arguing, and she had a way of making me feel like I was the unreasonable one if I pushed back. But over time, it stopped being about avoiding conflict and started being about survival. I was shrinking myself to fit her world, and the more I gave, the more she took. She didn't even seem to notice or care how it was chipping away at me. I catch myself staring out the window at night, wondering when I'd stopped feeling like her partner and started feeling like her shadow. The worst part? She'd twist things when I tried to talk about it. I'd muster up the courage to say something carefully because I didn't want to fight, like, "Hey, I feel like my opinion doesn't count much lately." She'd blink at me, then brush it off. "You're making a mountain out of nothing," she'd say, or, "I don't know why you're so sensitive about this." It was like my feelings were a glitch she could reboot with a shrug. I'd walk away from those talks feeling smaller, like I was the problem for even bringing it up. She never dug deeper, never asked what I meant or how she could help. Instead, she'd turn it around, leaving me questioning myself. Was I too needy? Too dramatic? I'd lie awake replaying it, try to figure out where I'd gone wrong, while she slept soundly next to me. That dynamic started bleeding into everything. Our house stopped feeling like a home and became this sterile space we shared. I'd linger at the office, sketching designs I didn't need to finish, just to avoid the silence waiting for me. When I'd come home, we'd barely talk. Maybe a "how was your day?" that went nowhere. We'd eat dinner in front of the TV, the hum of some show filling the void between us. Months passed like that, two people orbiting each other without ever colliding. The only time we'd snap into couple mode was around others, dinner parties, work events, outings with friends. We'd plaster on smiles, play the part, and for a few hours, we'd look perfect. But the second we were alone again, the masks dropped, and we'd retreat to our corners. It was exhausting living a double life, pretending for the world while falling apart behind closed doors. Julia's 32nd birthday was on the horizon, and I saw it as a lifeline. I was so tired of the distance, the quiet, the way we'd become strangers. I thought maybe her birthday could be a reset, a chance to show her I wasn't ready to let us fade out. I didn't know how to fix everything, but I figured a big gesture might crack the ice between us. Then one night, she wandered into the kitchen and said, "I might do a little party for my birthday." It was casual, tossed out like an afterthought, but I seized it. "Let me handle it," I said, jumping in before she could change her mind. "I'll plan the whole thing. You just show up." Her face lit up, and she hugged me, a rare spark of warmth. "That'd be amazing," she said. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. If I could pull this off, make it perfect, maybe we'd find our way back to each other. I was determined to make it happen. Planning Julia's birthday became my mission. I threw myself into it, desperate to make a night she'd never forget, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to pull us out of the rut we'd fallen into. I wanted her to see I still cared, that I wasn't ready to let our marriage dissolve into the cold, distant thing it had become. I teamed up with an event planner from Boulder, someone who knew how to turn a vision into reality. We hashed out every detail: elegant string lights for the backyard, a playlist of her favorite indie bands, a menu with all the dishes she loved. I didn't skimp on anything: custom invites, extra bouquets of wildflowers, even a signature cocktail I named after her. It had to be flawless. I kept picturing her face lighting up, the way it used to when I'd surprise her back in our Denver days. If I could just get that spark back, I thought we might stand a chance. The day arrived, and the house looked like something out of a magazine. The backyard glowed under the lights, the air buzzing with music and the scent of grilled food. I stood back as guests trickled in. Friend from her consulting gigs, a few of my coworkers, some faces I didn't even recognize. It didn't matter. This was her night. Julia swept in like she owned the place, and honestly, she did. She was radiant. Hair swept back, eyes bright, moving through the crowd with that effortless charm I'd fallen for years ago. I watched her laugh, clink glasses, soak in the attention, and for a moment, I let myself hope. Maybe this was it, the turning point. I'd even tucked away a gift for later, a delicate silver necklace I'd spent weeks picking out, something simple but from the heart. I imagined us alone after the party, me handing it to her, finally saying the things I'd been too scared to voice. It felt possible. The night rolled on, the energy high and electric. People mingled, the drinks flowed, and I played host, refilling trays, chatting with guests, keeping everything smooth. Julia floated through it all, the center of gravity, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months, and it gave me this quiet swell of pride. I'd done this, for her, for us. Then came the moment I hadn't planned for. Julia stood up to give a speech. The crowd hushed, glasses raised, and she started with the usual, thanking everyone for coming, saying how much it meant to have them there. She smiled, her voice warm, talking about hitting 32, how life had unfolded so beautifully, how grateful she was for the journey. It was standard stuff, the kind of thing you'd expect at a party like this, and I stood there, nodding along, feeling good about pulling it off. But then her tone shifted just a little. She scanned the crowd, her smile widening, and said, "Yeah, everything's worked out pretty great." She paused, then added, "Well, except I guess I settled for Nathan." The words hung there for a split second before the room burst into laughter. It was light, playful to them, a cheeky jab, a crowd pleaser. People chuckled, some clapped, and Julia grinned like she'd nailed a punchline. But I didn't laugh. I couldn't. The ground tilted under me, and the noise around me blurred into a dull roar. Settled for me. I'd heard it before, whispered in arguments, tossed out when she was annoyed, but never like this, never in front of everyone. It wasn't a joke to me. It was a blade, slicing open a wound I'd been trying to bandage for months, maybe years. And the laughter? That made it worse, like salt rubbed in deep. I stood there, frozen, as she moved on, mingling like nothing had happened. Guests kept chatting, oblivious, but I felt every eye on me, or maybe none at all, which was somehow worse. That word, settled, kept echoing, louder each time. It wasn't just a slip. It was the truth she'd been carrying, the one she'd let spill in front of our whole world. I wasn't her partner, her equal. I was the fallback, the guy she'd deigned to put up with. Every time she'd brush me off, every time she'd acted like I was lucky she stayed, it crystallized in that moment. I'd spent years convincing myself it wasn't that bad, that I could fix it, but right then, I saw it clear as day. She didn't respect me. She never really had. And I've been a fool to think love could paper over that. I didn't make a scene. I couldn't. Not with everyone there. Not when I was still reeling. Instead, I turned and walked inside, my chest tight, my hands shaking. I went straight to our bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and started stuffing it, clothes, keys, whatever I could grab. I didn't think it through. I just moved. I couldn't stay in that house, in that life, with someone who could say that and not even flinch. The party hummed on outside, voices and music filtering through the walls, but it felt a million miles away. A couple hours later, my phone buzzed, Julia. I stared at her name on the screen, anger boiling up, but I let it go to voicemail. Then a text. Where are you? Short, sharp, like I'd inconvenienced her. I didn't answer. I was too raw, too done to even try forming words. She called next, and I let it ring 4 times before picking up, bracing myself. Before she could speak, I cut in. I'm sick of your humiliation, Julia. Tonight was it for me. There was a beat of silence, shock, maybe, or irritation. Then she played dumb like always. What are you talking about? It was a joke. You're overreacting. Her voice had that edge, the one that turned everything back on me. Overreacting, like I was a kid throwing a fit, not a man who'd just been gutted in front of everyone. My pulse pounded. A joke, I said, barely keeping it together. That's what you call it. I'm done. She started to argue, but I hung up. I didn't need more of her excuses, her spin. She'd shown me who she was, who I was to her, and I wasn't sticking around to hear her talk her way out of it. The line went dead, but Julia didn't stop. My phone lit up again, another call, then another. I let them ring out, staring at the screen as her name flashed over and over. Each unanswered call felt like a small rebellion, a refusal to let her drag me back into her version of reality. Then came a text. It was just a joke. I didn't mean it like that. Come back. I could almost hear her tone through the words, defensive, a little annoyed, like I was the one being unreasonable. I didn't reply. Her words were hollow, a flimsy patch on a hole she'd torn wide open. She wasn't sorry, not really. She just didn't like that I'd walked away, that I'd stopped playing along. I turned off my phone and sat there in the dark, the hum of the party still faintly audible through the walls. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my own anger, and I wasn't going to let it go. I didn't sleep that night. I crashed at a cheap motel just outside Boulder, the kind with flickering neon signs and thin walls. Lying on the lumpy bed, I replayed everything. Not just the speech, but the years leading up to it. Every time she dismissed me, every time I'd swallowed my pride to keep the peace, every time I'd told myself it'd get better. It was like watching a movie of my own life and realizing I'd been the sucker the whole time. Julia's joke wasn't a one-off. It was the truth she'd been too careless to hide anymore. She saw me as less than her, less than what she deserved. And I'd spent our marriage trying to prove I was enough. But I wasn't, not to her, and that realization hit like a punch I couldn't dodge. Days turned into weeks, and Julia didn't let up. She called, texted, left voicemails that swung between pleading and irritated. Nathan, we need to talk. You're blowing this out of proportion. I'm sorry, okay? Just come home. I didn't respond, not once. Her apologies felt like traps, designed to pull me back into the same cycle. I'd forgive, she'd promised to change, and nothing would. I'd seen that play out before, in smaller fights, in quiet resentments I'd let slide. This time was different. That night at the party had stripped away the last shred of denial I'd been clinging to. I couldn't unhear what she'd said, couldn't unfeel the humiliation. She'd show me her cards, and I wasn't bluffing my way through anymore. I knew what I had to do. I met with a divorce lawyer in Denver, a no-nonsense guy who didn't sugarcoat things. "You sure about this?" he asked, flipping through some paperwork. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm done losing here." He nodded, like he'd heard all before, and got to work. A few days later, Julia was served the papers. I didn't see her face when it happened, but I could imagine it. Shock, maybe anger, maybe tears. I didn't care. I'd spent too long worrying about how she felt, and it had gotten me nowhere. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. I needed out of the quicksand our marriage had become, and those papers were my lifeline. 2 days after that, I went back to the house to grab the rest of my stuff. I timed it for midday, figuring she'd be out with a client. But when I pulled up, her car was in the driveway. My stomach sank, but I wasn't turning back. I walked in, keys jangling, and started packing books, clothes, a few sketches I'd framed. I was halfway through when I heard her footsteps. She came into the living room, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears. "Nathan," she said, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. Think about what we promised each other, our vows." She stepped closer, hands trembling. "We can fix this. I'll try harder. I swear." Her crying hit me, but it didn't move me, not like it used to. I'd seen her tears before, heard her promises, and they'd always dried up into the same old patterns. I kept packing, shoving shirts in my bag. "That doesn't mean anything to me anymore," I said, not looking at her. "You broke those vows long before I did. Every time you made me feel like nothing. I'm not doing it again." She sobbed harder, sinking onto the couch, but I didn't stop. Her words were echoes of a script I'd outgrown. "I didn't mean it," she choked out. "I love you, Nathan. Don't throw this away." I zipped the bag and finally met her eyes. "You threw it away," I said. "Not me." I grabbed my things and walked out, her cries fading behind me as I shut the door. The air outside felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I hadn't known I was carrying. I tossed the bag in my truck and drove off, the house shrinking in the rear view. For the first time in years, I felt free. Looking back, I see it wasn't just the party that ended us. It was everything before it, piling up like bricks until the wall collapsed. Julia didn't wake up one day and decide to disrespect me. She'd been doing it all along, and I'd let her. I'd bent over backwards to make her happy, to fit her mold, and lost myself in the process. That night was just the final straw, the moment I couldn't bend anymore without breaking. I don't regret walking away, not now. Staying would have meant signing up for more of the same, and I was worth more than that, even if she never saw it. The divorce isn't final yet, but it's coming, and with every step, I'm reclaiming the pieces of me I'd let slip away. It's not easy, but it's mine. It's been a few months since I walked out of that house in Boulder, and the dust is still settling. The divorce papers are working their way through the system, slow and steady, but I'm not looking back. Julia's calls have tapered off. First a flood, then a trickle, now nothing. I don't know if she's given up or just moved on, and honestly, it doesn't matter. I'm not the guy who left that party anymore, bag slung over my shoulder, anger burning in my chest. I'm still figuring out who I am without her, but it's a process I'm owning step by step. Looking at it all now, from the glow of our beginning to the wreckage of the end, I've pulled some hard-earned lessons out of the mess. They're things I wish I'd known sooner, and I'm sharing them because maybe they'll hit home for you, whether you're in the thick of something similar or just thinking about what's ahead. First, never assume you're on the same page about the big stuff without talking it out, really talking it out. I went into our marriage thinking Julia and I saw the same future. Kids, a loud, messy house, the works. But I never asked her straight up, never sat her down and said, "What do you want out of this?" I assumed because it felt right to me, it'd feel right to her. That was lazy, and it cost me. You can't build a life with someone on guesswork. If you're heading into something serious, lay it all out. Kids, money, dreams, whatever matters to you. Make sure you're aligned, not just hoping they'll catch up. I learned that one the hard way, and it's not a mistake I'll repeat. Second, if someone keeps disrespecting you, even in jokes, believe them. That's who they are. Julia's little digs, those settled for you lines, weren't accidents. They were her truth sneaking out, and I spent too long telling myself they didn't mean anything. When someone chips away at you like that, even if they laugh it off, it's not harmless. It's a sign of how they see you, and if you let it slide, they'll keep chipping. I ignored it because I didn't want to fight, didn't want to rock the boat, but all that did was sink me deeper. Don't wait for it to get loud to take it seriously. Those quiet cuts add up, and they'll bleed you dry if you let them. Third, silence isn't peace. It's a slow rot. I used to think the quiet in our house meant we were okay. No yelling, no slamming doors, just calm. But it wasn't calm. It was emptiness. We weren't talking, weren't connecting. We were drifting, and I let it happen. I'd hide out at work. She'd bury herself in her projects, and we'd coast like that for months. I told myself it was better than arguing, but it wasn't. It was us giving up without saying it. If you're in a relationship and the silence feels heavy, don't ignore it. It's not a truce. It's a sign something's dying, and the longer you let it fester, the harder it is to pull back. I mistook it for stability, but it was just the calm before the collapse. Fourth, when someone brushes off your feelings over and over, they're showing you your worth to them, and it's not much. Julia had a knack for that. I tried to tell her how I felt, how her words hit me, how I was fading in our marriage, and she'd wave it away. You're too sensitive, she'd say, or it's not a big deal. Every time, it was like she was telling me I didn't matter enough to listen to. That's not love. It's indifference dressed up as patience. If they can't even try to hear you, to see why you're hurting, they're not in it with you. They're just coasting. I let it go on too long, thinking I could tough it out, but you shouldn't have to beg for someone to care. That's a lesson I'll carry forever. So here I am, turning it over to you. What do you think? Was I wrong to walk out that night, to cut the cord after a speech? Did I miss something I should have seen, or was I right to draw the line? If you were me, standing there, hearing that settled line in front of everyone, what would you have done? I'm not asking for pity. I just want your take. Drop it below. Your thoughts, your stories, whatever you've got. Maybe you've been through this too, felt that slow grind of disrespect, or that moment when you knew it was over. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for sticking with me through this. It's been a ride. And if you pull even one thing from it, that's enough for me. I'm moving forward now, not whole yet, but getting there. And that's more than I could say before.